Hello and welcome. I'm Dave. Today we're going to learn how to use NextAuth.js to add role-based access control and user authorization to your Next.js 13 application. And I'll provide links to all resources in the description below. I'll also provide a link for you to join my Discord server where you can discuss web development with other students, and you can ask questions that I can answer and receive help from other viewers too. I look forward to seeing you there. As I expected after last week's NextAuth tutorial, many have requested to see how role-based access control and user authorization can be applied to protected routes in Next.js. So we're going to start with the completed code from last week's NextAuth tutorial, and I'll link to the starter code in the description below. And also, I'll link to the video because if you haven't completed that NextAuth tutorial, you really need to do that first before you try to apply anything that you see in today's tutorial. I've got VS Code open, and with that starter source code that I've talked about and is linked in the description, just note that I'm using Next.js 13.4.7. I believe 13.4.8 may have been released yesterday or today, and of course if you're watching this in the future there may be a newer version, but if you want to follow along with the exact version that I have, you can go ahead and install Next 13.4.7, just like I'm using today. Just wanted to note that. Okay, let's move on. And in the source code, last time we set up a route handler inside of app API, and it's in auth, and then in this catch-all route that is NextAuth. And what we need inside of here is the options file where we set up our next options. And we need to make some changes here today first. And the first thing I want to do is import the GitHub profile. So I'm going to import, this is GitHub profile from Next-Auth providers, then /GitHub. After that, we're going to use that inside of our providers for our GitHub provider because we need to add a profile function. At the very top here of our GitHub provider, we'll just start with our profile function. And it receives a profile, and that would be the GitHub profile type that we just imported. Now after that, we'll go ahead and take care of the body of the function. One thing I want to do is just console.log the profile right here so you can see everything that would come in from GitHub if you run this. And I'm going to comment this out, but I want to leave it in the source code for you just so you could check to see everything you're receiving from GitHub. Now this would log to your server console, so it would be in the terminal. But after that, what we really need in the function is to return whatever we want to return from the profile. So we can spread in the existing profile, and then we can add a role to that. Now GitHub or any OAuth provider may not be providing the role we expect to get. So if we want to assign a role from them that could be inside of the GitHub profile, for example, we could say profile.role, but then we can also use a null coalescing operator here to just say, if not, provide user, and that's more than likely what it would be. Also, we could just assign the role of user anytime anybody logs in with any OAuth provider like we're doing here. So you might not have anything for that specific role that would be coming in anyway. I just wanted to show the example of how you could get it if you did. After this, we're also going to say there is an ID. Now there's already an ID from GitHub, but the GitHub profile has it as a number, and we've been using it as a string inside of our credentials provider, as we could see down here with this fake user that we created in the last tutorial. So I've got ID 42 and it's a string. So I need this to be a string as well to match the user that we have or the user type as well. So I'm going to say profile.id, which is what we get from GitHub, and then I'm going to say toString, just so it matches and we don't get a complaint from TypeScript that way. Also, we were previously using an assigned image, but now that we start using this profile function, it doesn't really come in as the image. If you check what you get from GitHub, it comes in as an avatar underscore URL. So we just kind of need to rename that to the image here, and it's being sent back. Now we could specify, like there's also an email that we were using or potentially using. We could specify that and not spread in the rest of the profile if we didn't want to. You can only take the things you want or that would match your user type actually, and that might be a better way to do it. But this is the way you would get everything from the profile as well. So that's what I'm doing, and then we're just adding in the additional properties that we need to that user right here. Now all I need to do here is add a comma, and we're finished adding the profile function. Now this would work the same way with any OAuth provider. We only provided the GitHub OAuth provider to this example application, just so it shows how you could do this with Google or Facebook or any place. But they may not provide the same profile properties and values, so you would just have to look at that, and you could do that by logging that profile to the console to see what you were receiving from that different service, because each one could be different. And now we need to scroll down into our credentials provider, and this is where we were logging in with a username and password. The only thing we need to change here is really the fake data that we're using, because right now it has an ID, name, and a password. We also need to add a role for this user, and I'm going to set it to admin for our first example. So this would be, and as this note says that I left in the last repository, this is where you could retrieve user data to verify credentials wherever you were keeping that user table or user data. So I'm just hard coding one in, and we can use this to check our examples with, but you could retrieve it right here as well. And that's the only change inside of the authorize function here for the credentials provider. So we've got one OAuth provider at the top here with GitHub, and our credentials provider, which would be a username and password. I'm back in the browser at the NextAuth docs, and this is the subtitle here, persisting the role that we're at. And so what we need to look at is how we might want to do that. And really the focus here is the callbacks part, and we don't have that yet in our options. And we need to add this to our options file. So we see the providers up here. It comes right underneath the providers. And this is how we will persist the user roles. Now the JWT is how it would persist on the server. We only need the session if we're going to do that with a client component. And I'm going to show both, so we'll go ahead and add both today. Back in VS Code, I'm going to scroll for a little more room. This goes under our providers, and it is called callbacks. Now this will be an object, and let me go ahead and paste in that reference URL just so you'll have it in here for where we were looking at that information in the docs. So I'll put that reference URL in here. After that, we can put in our async JWT function. It's going to receive the token and the user. Now inside this function, I'm going to say if we have a user, then the token.role equals the user.role. And then we're going to return the token. Now don't worry about TypeScript's complaints. We will fix that in just a little bit. Let's go ahead and add the other async function we need. And I should add a note here as well. So this is if you want to use the role in client components. So I'll put that right here. And now if we want to use that role, we need our async session function, and it's going to receive session and the token. Now inside this function, let's say if there is a session user, then we're going to say session.user.role equals the token.role that we will have, and then we'll return the session. Now currently TypeScript isn't too happy with our user that has a role or our session user that has a role. So what we need to do is module augmentation. We can actually extend these current interfaces as they exist to go ahead and add what we need. And to do this, I'm going to come over here into the file tree just in the same level where we have the package.json. You could create a folder called types if you want to. I'm just going to create it at this level right here. And this is going to be a file named Next.auth.d.ts. Now again, as I'm trying to provide references for you, you can reference the docs at this URL where they do talk about module augmentation, and that's what we're going to do here today. So we're going to import the default session and also the default user. And then after we import those from Next-Auth, we also need to import JWT and the default JWT. Those are going to come from Next-Auth/JWT. Now we start with a declare module, and this is going to be Next-Auth. Then inside of this object, we have an interface that is the session. Now for this session inside, we have a user. So that is our session.user. And then here, we need to go ahead and define an ID that is a string and a role that is a string. And then after that, to include the rest of what was normally with the session, we need to say and default session. So you can see how we've created or extended the session. Actually, we've added the extra part of the user and then what was already there for the default session. Now let's do this for the user interface, but it's just a little different. We'll say interface user, and now we need to say extends default user. And this is because we don't have a nested user object inside that we're extending. We're just extending user right here, and all we need to add is role string. And now in a separate module, so I need to scroll up, we're going to go ahead and declare once again, so declare module, and this will be Next-Auth/JWT. And inside of this, we'll have an interface that is the JWT, and we're extending default JWT interface. And we'll once again add a role that is a string. So now all of those changes should be saved and applied. If you're interested more about module augmentation and how you can extend these types, go ahead and look at this URL. It doesn't play a specific role into what we're doing today other than we need it for adding roles essentially, and here we added a string ID as well. But this is what we need to go ahead and augment the types that we're using today. So now back in our options, we no longer have these TypeScript red squiggly errors that we had for adding the role to the session.user or the role to the user here inside of these functions. And now because we have changed the user specifically here, we also need to look at our component that was using the user type before, which is the user card, I believe. Yes, and I was defining it here. We can go ahead and remove this. And of course, now we'll get some complaining until we define the user once again. So let's import type user. This is going to come from NextAuth because we're using the type that we extended. And so now we've extended this user and we can just use it right here without that previous definition. So you can change that. One other thing I want to add in the code is to go ahead and display the role on the page when we get it. And I guess, yes, I can just scroll down and put it here at the bottom after we have the page type. So I'm going to Shift Alt and the down arrow to just copy that line down, the paragraph that has the page type. And I'm going to display the user.role right here, and I'll just remove page exclamation mark, and I'll go ahead and add role and a colon there, just so we can display the role when we view this page, no matter what page, it's any specific page, because this card, the user card, could be used on any page. So this could change depending on which page we're going to view. And with these changes in place, we now need to go to the middleware to make some final changes before we can test out the application once again. Now, we were previously applying the authorization, or the authentication, I should say, in the last tutorial for the extra, and we don't have a dashboard page, but I gave this as an example. But we were applying this with the middleware as one of 3 different examples of how we could apply that authentication. But right now, we're going to remove the way we previously did this. So you could comment it out to keep this in your code if you want, but we no longer need this export default here. So I'm just going to delete lines 1 through 3 altogether. I am going to paste in another reference. I'll Alt-Z to wrap that down. This is under advanced usage in the Next.js auth configuration here. So this link will take you to what I'm going to be referring to here, because we're going to import a withAuth wrapper, and this is going to wrap around our middleware function. So it comes from Next-Auth/middleware. Now that we've imported that, we need to actually import one more thing. This is import type, and this will be the next request with auth type that we also get from Next Auth middleware. So I guess they could come in the same import. Actually, here we could just double click and I will cut and paste because they're coming from the same place. So we'll just put them in the same import statement. But we need both of these as we apply this new strategy. So I'm going to start with export default with auth and then have a parentheses. And now this with auth augments your request that you'll get in the middleware function, and it puts the user's token in that request object. So now we'll have a function middleware, and now we'll have a request, and let's just make this the next request with auth type. Now inside of this middleware function, we can do several things, but we're not going to do much right now. But let's go ahead and put a couple of console log statements so you can look at the request.nextURL.pathname, and this would be whatever path name is being requested. We could also log the request.nextAuth.token if we want to see what the token looks like. So we can do several things in the middleware, and we will come back to that. Let me go ahead and paste in the comment that I was telling you as well to let you know what this withAuth function does, or this wrapper actually. It augments your request with the user's token. So you want to remember that you now have the token available on the request. It's at request.nextauth.token. But now after this middleware function, we need to provide callbacks. And this is where it becomes fairly powerful. So here we'll just have callbacks, and we're going to have an authorized function. And this authorized function, need a colon there actually, is going to have the token passed in. And now we could compare the tokens. So here's just one example. We will change this, but in this example, we'll just look at the token, and we'll look at that token role, see if it is equal to admin. And I was wondering why I had so many red squigglies, and I thought it was because I hadn't finished typing, but no, actually callbacks goes inside of an object here. So we'll start with an object and we'll end with an object. We'll save, we'll get the proper formatting. You could put a comma after the object that is assigned to callbacks as well. What's important to understand here is unless our callback, our authorized function inside of the callback, unless it returns true, so unless the token role equals admin, this middleware function will not execute. So it only executes if authorized returns true. Now this applies to everything we would have inside the matcher. So at this point, if we have the role admin in our token, then we can go ahead and view the extra page, for example. And if we had a dashboard page, we could view it. But if we don't, we won't be able to view the extra page. We will not be authorized. Let's save our changes to the middleware file, but before we can test this out, one thing I would like to remind you is if you've cloned the repository from the previous tutorial, you still need the environment variables. I never include those, as you shouldn't include environment variables in GitHub, and we created those in that first tutorial. So if you haven't completed that first tutorial, that would definitely help you. I'm going to go ahead and create the .env.local file now here at the same level as the package.json file. So it's .env.local. And then inside of this, I'm going to delete my values after this tutorial. You can't use mine, but what you will need to do is learn how to create a NextAuth secret, which is in the previous tutorial. Also, we created a GitHub ID and GitHub secret for OAuth with GitHub in that tutorial. So you need values, and once again, you can't just copy mine. That won't work. So we'll save this. If you don't have these values from the previous tutorial, please go complete that. Then you can come back and finish the rest of this with us. And it is linked in the description. But now that we have our changes and we've made sure that we have the environment variable values that we need, let's go ahead and start our application. So I'm going to do Control and the back tick, and now I've got a terminal window open. I'll type npm run dev to start the application, Should get started on localhost 3000. I'll control click that, and let's take a look at the application in Chrome here when it gets started. And I'm currently logged in. Let me go ahead and sign out so we can start from scratch. And we should see you shall not pass. So that is the home page that we were left with. It was checking for authentication in one way, and we checked in different ways for the server and client and extra as well. That was in the previous tutorial, but now we want to go ahead and sign in. So I'll sign in with GitHub. And once I'm signed in, we should see a welcome here. I'm seeing my GitHub image, the home page, and it says my role is user. And that's what's expected when we go ahead and sign in with GitHub. Now I should be able to see the server page as well. And now it says it's a server page. I should be able to see the client page, and I can. And once again, still have the role of user. I should not be able to see the extra page. And now it takes me to the sign in, but I'm already signed in. So this is something we'll want to fix here as we move forward, but it is working. It did apply that authentication to the extra page in the middleware as expected, so we just couldn't get there. And by adding the user.role to that user card, it looks like I've created an error, at least at some point along the way. It didn't always error, but if we don't have a user role, we do get an error on that component, no matter which other component it is nested in. So let's pull that back up as well, and we can put in a check for that. Back in VS Code, I'll close the terminal. I think we're having a problem with the client page. If we go to this page, it's the only one that's not really checking here before we get the user. And yes, TypeScript is showing us an issue here as well. So let's just do something like, say, if we have no session user, then let's just return. And we could return something like no user or anything else we wanted to, but essentially we just don't have anything. So I'm putting in that return there, and you could put whatever you want in that spot. I'm going to actually fix this moreover, so it shouldn't ever get here as we go back to the middleware. But TypeScript may still want to see something like this in here just so it doesn't get to this part and not have a user. Now let's once again open a terminal, and of course because of the error and not everything is running, let's go ahead and Control-C to stop. Once again, start the server, and what we want to do now is log in as an admin and just make sure the extra route is working as expected when we are an admin as well. So I'll pull this back up. I'm going to sign out, and we'll want to use the username and password now, and I had hard-coded mine in, so put this in. And if you're looking for where that is hard-coded, that is in the options, is where we had that instead of pulling it from a database. And yes, now we can see the extra page because we are an admin when we log in that way, and we can check that by going to any of these other components that displays the role. So the server component, client component, both show that. We go to home, it also displays which role we have because they're all using that user card. Back in VS Code, let's go back to the middleware, and we can fix some of these things that aren't quite so smooth right now. Let's talk about the good and the bad of what we currently have too. The good is that admins can access the protected routes in the matcher. Here is our matcher for the middleware, and we've currently got the extra route in here and the dashboard route, which really doesn't exist, but the extra is being protected, and only an admin can view that extra route. So we've protected the route, but it's more like an on-off switch. And so that's kind of the bad thing, because it doesn't give the tiered structure we'd need to apply this to many different roles, for example. So we could make some changes and do that. Imagine we have a user role, we have a manager role, and we have an admin role, and we want to provide some structure for each of those. I want to make just a few changes to the application to display this more, I guess in a better way, I should say, before we come back and make all the changes to the middleware. So first, let's just go to the default page, because we were, of course, looking at this to see if we had a session and then displaying the user card or a you shall not pass message. But I'd rather just go ahead and delete all of that and put in an H1, and I want to give it a class of text-5XL from Tailwind. Now inside of this, I'm just going to say this is a public home page. So this is going to be displayed even if we aren't logged in. So that will give us one example of not being logged in and one page we can see. So I can remove that session there, and we shouldn't need any of the imports at the top anymore either. This becomes a very, very simple component. Now, if we look at this server page, we're not going to make any changes here, but we just need to be logged in to see this. It's not picky about what type of login. So a user, a manager, or an admin can view the server page. So we'll just leave this as is. We definitely have to be logged in, as it checks that right there, but we don't have to have any specific role to see it after we're logged in. And now let's look at the client page. Now for the client page, we were making sure we have a session before we attempt to pass it to the user card. And then we just are returning nothing here. We could return null, or we could return a message if we wanted to in an H1, anything like that. But what we could do, and I'm just going to copy and put this in because I'm not going to leave it, but I do want to go ahead and show you what you could do. I want to put in something like this, and I can go ahead and comment out that line. We could check the user role right here, and this would allow us to do this on a component or page basis, if you will. So we have session.user.role. We're checking to see if it is an admin, or if it's not an admin and it's not a manager. So it needs to be one of those two to view what we would go ahead and display. And if not, it returns access denied. But if we're an admin or we're a manager, then we could see what's on the page. And of course, this takes the place of this simple statement right here because it's already checking to make sure we have a session.user.role. Otherwise, it's returning access denied. So this also makes TypeScript happy, but I'm going to show how we can do this with middleware without needing to do this in every component or every subtree or however we would apply this. We can just handle it with middleware. So in that case, I'll comment this out, but then once again, to make TypeScript happy, I'm going to need to put this back, although this shouldn't be used if we apply the middleware correctly. Okay, going to the middleware file, the first thing we're going to change is this callback. Right now, we're using the authorized function as an on-off switch. So we return true if we're an admin and false if we're not. And so that really limits what we can do. It's basically an on-off for the admins only. Instead, let's go ahead and just make sure we have a token here and confirm that token. So to do that, we can delete everything after token. But let's put the double bang operator in front of it just to verify that it is absolutely true that we do have a token. So if we have a token, this is true, and now the middleware function will execute, and that's what we want to check out here next. So with that middleware function, we can start checking more individual things inside of here. So let's first say if, and then we'll have request.nextURL.pathname.starts with, and now inside of this, let's put in our /extra route that we're going to have. And now after that, we're going to bring this down to another line just for some room. We'll do the double ampersand. So if it starts with extra and request.nextAuth.token.role is not equal to admin, because actually you need to be an admin to see this extra route. So we're saying if it's not equal to admin, but yet the extra route is being requested, then we're going to return a next response dot rewrite, and that means the /extra route will still display in the URL bar when we use a rewrite. Then we can say new URL, and we're going to create a new page, and this is going to be the denied page that we can use. And then after denied here, let me give the double quote, then we're going to just pass in the request URL because that's what URL accepts here. So we'll pass in the original URL, but we're sending them to denied, but the original one will be displayed. And I think I need to import that next response up at the top. Yes, we don't have that yet. So let's go ahead and do that. That will be import next response from next server. That looks correct. So we're good there. Yes, our red squiggly is gone. So this would apply to the extra route. Now let's go ahead and do one more. And to do one more, we want to apply it to the client route. So we need to add the client route to our matcher as well. So I'll put that here, client, a comma after, and now we have extra client and dashboard in our matcher. Now we can come back up here and add our if statement for the client route as well. So once again, if request.nextURL.pathname.starts with, now we'll put in /client. And let's break this down too, because we're going to then have and request.nextAuth.token role, and then not equals admin, and then we'll also have another double ampersand here, and I'm just going to copy all of this because we don't need to change much of it. Control C, Control V to paste it in. Now I'll be putting manager here as well. So if it's not equal to that, then we'll have our return with a next response that I can copy and paste right here as well, because once again, it should go to the denied with the request URL being displayed. So this made the client route now available to an admin and a manager, either one. So as long as we're an admin or a manager, we should be able to view the client route. But if we're not an admin or manager and we request the client route, we are going to get redirected essentially, but with a rewrite, which is important because it will display the requested URL, but it will send us to the denied route. So let's save these changes in our middleware and let's make that denied route. Now quickly do this. I'll just click the root page here and I want to create a new directory and it's denied. And inside of this denied directory, I'm creating a page.tsx. And inside of the page.tsx, I'm quickly pasting in the page that I am providing, but you could create your own. Essentially, I'm importing link so we can link back to the home page, but I just want to display a message here that says access denied. It lets them know they are logged in, but they do not have the required access level to view this page. And I can say this page because it's going to display the route they requested at the top, whether that's /extra or /client. Okay, with all of these changes in place, let's open a terminal. It looks like our application is still running. I hope everything's applied. If not, we may need to restart it. You never know for sure. But I'll go ahead and check now. And we are on a public homepage, and that's what I wanted. I'm not sure what I'm signed in as, so I'm going to check the server right here. It says I'm currently an admin. That's okay. I should be able to view everything this way. So let's verify that. Here is the client page. The home page is a public page now. So now let's check extra. And yes, I can view extra. So go back to home, sign out, and notice I don't have a callback if you can see this up here. So I shouldn't be sent to one of the other pages, hopefully. Let's sign out. Now it took me to a login, and maybe this is cached. I did notice it gave me the callback for the extra page here, and I don't want that, so I'm just going to delete it for our example. I'm just going to go to the home page now, and now once again try to sign in. And when I sign in now, I'm just going to sign in as a GitHub user, and once I'm signed in there, it took me to the extra page, so it definitely wants to take me to that extra page after sign in. This could be something I need to clear my cache over. You could comment and let me know if you have the same problem or you figure out what's going on with that. But I get the access denied because I am just at the user level and I shouldn't be able to view the client either. Let's view the server because we're logged in. No matter what role we're logged in, we should be able to view the server page. Let me go to the client page. Access is denied. That's exactly what we expected. It does say /client up here. When I go to extra, access is denied, but it says /extra up here as well. That's all working as expected. That's what I want. Let me go ahead and sign out once again. And I want to go back to the home page. I'll delete all of the extra stuff there. I'm going to go back to VS Code though. And what I want to do in VS Code is go back to the options. And since we're not pulling in users from a user table, I just need to change what I've hard coded here. And I had admin. Let me change this to manager. And we'll save that as a manager role. And now I should be able to see the client page, but I should not be able to see the extra page. So I'll bring this back, and I hope I don't need to restart the app for that to happen. I'll refresh at least, see the server page, and it says I need to log in. Okay, maybe I did log out, that's right. So now I'll log in with my password, but I should be a manager. Yes, there's role manager. So that's good. Let me see if I can see the client page. I can see the client page as expected. And remember, this is being applied through middleware. So I couldn't see the client page as a user, but I can as a manager. But only an admin should be able to see extra. And that's what we've got. So my manager cannot see the extra page, but my admin could. Okay, even the documentation said some of this was advanced, and I know it was a lot to follow, but I hope it has helped you out. And in this tutorial, I hope you've learned that you can support multiple user roles and role-based access levels in Next.js with NextAuth.js. Now, NextAuth is very customizable, and if you have more requests, please let me know in the comments. Remember to keep striving for progress over perfection, and a little progress every day will go a very long way. Please give this video a like if it's helped you, and thank you for watching and subscribing. You're helping my channel grow. Have a great day, and let's write more code together very soon.